trade Harden to the Clippers or any other team unless the trade keeps the Sixers in contention for a title. Kawhi Leonard and Paul George are off limits, plus the Clippers don't have any first-round draft picks until 2027. If the Clippers can put something on the table that impresses Morey, Harden will be in the Clippers uniform next season. The Dodgers keep rolling. They win by 7 in Baltimore, a 3-run homer for Jason Hayward. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
2 years ago, on Juneteenth 2021, KBLA Talk 1580 launched with a promise to give disenfranchised fellow citizens a voice in current political, economic, social, and cultural issues with an empowering, sustainable, and restorative language.
Everybody's got a little light under the sun, under the sun, under the sun.
As we enter our third year, we are delighted that KBLA Talk 1580 consistently emerges as the talk station of choice for African American listeners. In a vigorous public opinion research study, the 2023 African American Media Issue Survey finds that for the second consecutive year, KBLA Talk 1580 remains the most trusted, credible, and reliable media source in Southern California for African Americans and beyond. Furthermore, 80% of those surveyed agree that outlets like KBLA Talk 1580 provide honest and authentic content about the issues most important to the Black community directly from Black journalists who understand the issues that need to be addressed. At KBLA Talk 1580, we remain committed to curating conversations that matter to you. Thank you for your continued support. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. The station that sounds like the city looks. The city looks.
I'm Marianne Williamson, and when I was growing up, America had a vibrant middle class. The average American worker had decent benefits, could afford a home, could afford a car, could afford a yearly vacation, could afford for one member of the couple to stay home if they wished, and could afford to send their kids to college. But over the last 50 years, there's been a massive transfer of wealth to the tune of $50 trillion from the bottom 90% of Americans to the top 1%, decimating America's middle class. We all owe President Biden a debt of gratitude for defeating President Trump in 2020. But with the things that they're going to be throwing at us in 2024, we need to submit to the American people an agenda of fundamental economic reform, universal health care, tuition-free colleges at state colleges and universities, higher education including tech schools, paternity and maternity leave, free child care, and a guaranteed living wage. These are things that are considered moderate positions in every other advanced democracy. But in the United States, people have been trained to expect too little. The American people have been played. What the Democratic Party should do is to truly return to the principles of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Not just alleviate people's suffering, but offer them genuine economic reform. Not just help people survive in an unjust system. The Democratic Party should end an unjust system. Washington, D.C., with a few brave exceptions, is filled with two major categories of leaders: those who don't even care about all the suffering that's going on out there, and those who do not have the moral courage to fix it. Let me in there. I will. I'm Marianne Williamson, and I approve this message.
I'm pleased to be joined live in studio by Democratic presidential candidate Marianne Williamson. And by the way, if you've never tuned us in on our YouTube channel or our app to watch us live in studio, now would be a good time to do it because Marianne is sitting right across from me right now as we speak. Marianne, it's been a while. It's good to see you. How are you?
I'm great, thank you, and it's good to see you too. Thank you so much for having me.
No, thanks for coming in. Glad we have an hour, a lot to talk about. Cornel West was in that seat just a few days ago.
Tell them I said hello.
I will. So they're coming in one at a time. We're getting you all in here in this season. Let me start with this. We have an hour, which is quite unusual, and you ain't got talking sound bites. You got time to sort of unpack your message for us, and so thanks again for the hour to talk to you. Let me start with this. Listening to your announcement, which is, I think, quite beautifully done.
Thank you.
It's abundantly clear to me why you're running. You stated your case, I think, quite convincingly, at least why you decided to get into the race. A couple of things about the announcement, though. You say in the piece that we owe Joe Biden a debt of gratitude, and yet you decided to run against him. Juxtapose those two things for me.
Well, I'm grateful that we defeated Donald Trump in 2020. That's all. But I think 2024 is a very different race than 2020. I think the country is in a different place. And I don't think there's a logical conclusion that because Biden was able to beat him in 2020, that necessarily means he could beat him in 2024. And moreover, I think that this should not be a decision made by the DNC. This should be a decision made by the Democratic electorate, who should hear all of their options. And then they should decide who would be the best person to oppose the Republicans in 2024, and probably even more importantly, or at least as importantly, who would be the best person to lead the country over the next 4 years.
You are, as am I, a student of history, and you know the last time that a sitting Democratic president was challenged, there was a bloodletting. Ted Kennedy ran against Jimmy Carter, as you know. All hell broke loose. Jimmy Carter ultimately survived that. He beat back that challenge by Ted Kennedy. And yet he was so beaten up that Ronald Reagan just cleaned his clock, ate his lunch. For those who would make a comparison between you or Bobby Kennedy or anybody else who may get in this race running against a sitting Democratic president, make a comparison between what you all are doing and what Kennedy did to Carter, how would you respond to that?
I respectfully disagree with your analysis of what happened in 1980. I think Ronald Reagan was the factor that beat Jimmy Carter. And I think that the way you just described it makes Teddy Kennedy way too big a figure in that drama. You know,
but you can't deny. I mean, you're entitled to your opinion, but you can't deny that there was indeed a bloodletting. That's a fact, Marianne, in the Democratic Party when Kennedy challenged Carter. You can't push back on that.
Listen, there's a bloodletting whenever there's an election. And, you know, in 2016, there were all these Republicans. Guess what? The Republican won. 2020, there were all these Democratic presidents. Guess what? The Democrat won. You know, I'm old enough to remember 1968. And I don't think anybody thought it was weird when Bobby Kennedy Sr. decided to challenge Lyndon Johnson. I don't think anybody thought it was weird when Eugene McCarthy did. And this was really democracy at work. These anti-war candidates, I do think, led to Lyndon Johnson not running. But that's democracy. That's the voice of the people being heard.
Yeah, but Johnson did say that he wasn't going to run. Joe Biden said the exact opposite.
No, not when they first primaried him.
Exactly.
So that's very, very different.
That's true.
No, and their primarying him, I think, made a big difference and led to his stepping down. And this was extremely important because it was the American people making a stand against the war. And I think that's what's happening right now. This is not about the horse race. This is not about what the DNC or the RNC, you know, the pundit class and all this drama. It's all horse race. It's all almost inside beltway that now dominates the national conversation.
Which I hate, by the way.
I know. I would think that you would, actually. This is about the American people and most specifically the suffering of too many American people. people. This is about 1 in 4 American people who live with medical debt, and the fact that President Biden says that he is not interested in Medicare for all and isn't even interested in a public option. This is about the fact that we are today living in the most, probably as much extreme heat is dominating the planet today. It is probably the coolest summer we will have in our lifetime. Reports out today about the fact that there is nowhere on the earth where rainwater is safe to drink. And we have, obviously, the Republican Party is in the hands of big oil, but President Biden himself has approved the Willow Project, which completely nullifies any of the healthy benefits of the green investments in the Inflation Reduction Act, and he has given more oil drilling permits than even Donald Trump did. This is what matters. What matters is the fact that 70% of Americans report living with chronic economic stress. This is what matters. What matters is the fact that 1/3 of Americans workers are living on less than $15 an hour and cannot find a place to live. That half of our seniors are living on less than $25,000 a year. We're all being seduced. This undertow to make it about this story of political parties, and I think that just proves George Washington's point and John Adams' point when he said that political parties themselves can be a threat to our democracy.
One other question when we come forward about you running against Joe Biden, we'll move beyond that. A lot to talk about with Marianne Williamson in this hour, including the suffering, including her point in that announcement that Americans have been played. Want to ask her how. It's going to be a fun hour with Marianne Williamson on KBLA Talk 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about. Good thing we've got 3 hours. More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward.
At Lowe's, we're always bringing pros more ways to save. Right now, save $50 when you buy the Tank 6-gallon pancake air compressor from Metabo HPT for just $199. Plus, get up to 20% off select James Hardy siding. Shop in-store or online for more deals you can't beat. Because Lowe's knows savings, Lowe's knows pros. Metabo HPT offer valid 7/6 through 7/26. James Hardy offer valid 7/13 through 7/19. Selection varies by location while supplies last.
With no fees or minimums and no overdraft fees, banking with Capital One is the easiest decision in the history of decisions. Kind of like choosing Derek Jeter as the pinch hitter for your baseball team.
Jeter, you're in. We need a home run.
I'll give it a try. I've swung a bat once or twice.
That's out of here.
Yep, even easier than that. With no fees or minimums and no overdraft fees, is it even a decision? That's banking reimagined. What's in your wallet?
Terms apply. See CapitalOne.com/bank for details. Capital One N.A. member FDIC.
What's up, LA? The Reparationist community got something real special going down in historic Leimert Park. August 12th, 2023. This event is sponsored by Reparations United and Black Pact, fighting for justice and empowering our community. Together, we can make moves. We have an insane lineup for y'all. The sultry Rotimi, the king of LA, The Game, smooth Eric Benet, and none other than the powerful sounds of blackness. Also, we have some special guests in the house. Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, State Senator Stephen Bradford, LA's beloved Councilwoman Heather Hutt, and many more. They're bringing their passion and leadership to the stage. Mark your calendars, August 12th, 2023, Leimert Park. Let's come together, support each other, and make a difference. Peace, love, and reparations benefit concert and unity rally. Be there or be left out. Produced by Tara Perry of Black Pact and Cam Howard of Reparations United.
Mom's early Alzheimer's diagnosis was hard to take.
And when I left the oven on, we decided together that it was time to see a doctor and make a plan.
Early detection gave us more time to seek out information and support as a family.
If you or your family are noticing changes, it could be Alzheimer's. Talk about seeing a doctor together. For more information, visit alz.org/time to talk. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
To my hometown, my community. Some of you have known me my whole life. Do you notice anything different about the kids in the neighborhood? Ever paid attention? You might start with gifts, money, attention. These are signs. Child trafficking is happening right here in this town. So don't just watch through the window. Pay attention. Because the more we know, the more we'll all know to say no. Learn the signs to look for and how to help at no-to-say-no.com.
Find a righteous rage and don't be afraid to say what you see. We're KBLA Talk 1580.
Our guest in this hour is Democratic presidential candidate Marianne Williamson, who joins us live in studio. Turn us on YouTube or our app and watch us, watch her. You see me every day, but Marianne's not here every day. Two more things I want to ask you about the Joe Biden issue, and then we'll move forward, Marianne. We talked earlier about whether or not there was or was not a bloodletting when Kennedy ran against Carter back in the day in the 70s. What is true is that Joe Biden must first dispense of Marianne Williamson and Bobby Kennedy and Cornel West before he can get to, at the moment, the presumptive Republican nominee, Donald Trump. For those who say that you're making him, the president, spend time and resources fighting an internal battle before he can go fight the real enemy, you say what?
Okay, first of all, Cornel West is running as a third-party candidate.
Green Party, correct.
So Biden does not have to dispense with him at this point. In terms of me and Bobby, I can't speak to their strategy concerning Bobby. Their strategy concerning me has to do with invisibilization. It has to do with getting everything from CNN to other mainstream news sources not to have me on. I was booked on CNN twice last week and then canceled, and those same sources then had Cornel. It has to do with their, I would say, just short of dirty tricks, having things such as Karine Jean-Pierre come out and make fun of me on the stage. This did not take any time out of the president's day. The president just raised $35 million. So somebody in some office somewhere is assigned to smearing me. I don't think that this is any big, lift for the president. Somebody is assigned to bringing down my campaign. Nothing that any of them should feel proud of.
Yeah. I raised your name earlier. This is a 3-hour program I host every day. You're in my final hour today. I raised your name earlier in this conversation, earlier in today's show, making the point that of the travesty, for me at least, that these networks keep giving Donald Trump all this free time. CNN did it in their town hall the day of the E. Jean Carroll verdict last night. Fox News did it, just kissing up to Donald Trump for ratings and for opportunity. And I said a couple hours ago, I'm sure Marianne Williamson would love that kind of time on
You better
CNN
believe it. And of
and
course,
Fox News. Yeah.
and we saw the disastrous consequences of this in 2016. Les Moonves so famously said, he was the head of CBS at the time, he said, bad for America, good for CBS.
Yeah.
At that time, at the beginning of the campaigns, Bernie Sanders had the same size at his crowds as Trump did, but they felt it was a better sell for them. They could get more clicks. They could get more sponsors by covering Trump because he was the guy from The Apprentice. And also, let's not kid ourselves, the Hillary Clinton campaign at that time thought that the person who would be best for them would be Trump. So this was all a bunch of calculations from people who were only thinking of money or power and were not thinking of the good of the country.
What do you do when the president and his team are trying to render you invisible?
It's I come on shows like yours. I do independent media. I do whatever podcasts I can. You're right, what you said, though. Why would they be giving town halls to people who have lower numbers in the polls than I do? Why would someone like Chuck Todd or any of those be talking to Republican candidates who, once again, have lower poll numbers than I do? And somebody there is like saying, do not have her on. What do I do? Or when polls, this is one I love, too, when polls don't even mention me. There's nothing to do except keep your head up high and keep walking. Someone said to me something that has made a difference to my thinking. Someone said to me a couple of months ago, Marianne, the most successful tightrope walkers are those who do not have a net. You just cannot indulge a fraction of a second going anywhere other than keeping your eyes on the light of the fire, keeping your eyes forward. You're either in or you're out. If you want to just bow your head, obviously they're telling you to go away. So, okay, that's one option. You bow your head, you put your tail between your legs, and you go away. I wasn't raised that way. I was raised with a father who said, don't let the bastards get to you. All that they are doing is protecting their neoliberal status quo. All they're doing is protecting a system that is essentially unjust to the majority of Americans. I'm not the kind of woman who's going to be quiet about that. The fact that it's an inconvenience to the status quo is the point.
I knew that I could count on Marianne. It didn't take long, 20 minutes in, to give me my quote of the day. The best tightrope walkers are those who do it without a net. I'm holding on to that the rest of the day. I thank you for that. Given what you've experienced so far, what is your read then? This audience knows how I feel about the media. It's my profession, but I'm sick of it for a lot of different reasons, and I try to push back as best I can on the platforms that I have. But given the way the media is disrespecting you, maltreating you, canceling you at the moment, what's your read of the so-called liberal media?
Well, there's a difference between liberal and progressive, as we know. And the liberal media, it just chops wood and carries water for the DNC. I mean, it's a just like they talk about a corporate duopoly, it is a corporate media establishment. Ever since the Telecommunications Act of 1996, as you're well aware, there's this conglomeratization, monopolization of the media. So even the liberal media is part of that. If you read Matt Taibbi's book, Hate, Inc., with the media, it's kind of like with everything else regarding the Republicans and the Democrats on an institutional level. The Republicans started this mess, but no Democrat stopped it. So it's at this point, it's the way they play the game. And anybody who thinks that MSNBC isn't just trying to extend the popularity of Joe Biden is kidding themselves.
To the word, your use of the word play, you said in your announcement piece that we played at the top of this conversation that Americans have been played. That's your quote. Americans have been played. Tell me how.
Well, back in, some would say it started with Carter. Certainly, whether you think it started with Carter or started with Reagan, it certainly exploded big time with all the money back from the Koch brothers, et cetera. This trickled-down economic canard, and it is a canard. It is the idea that if you move your money through deregulation, through tax cuts for the very rich, and through whatever other means, you move your resources, your financial resources, in the direction of the stockholder class, the CEO class, that somehow this would be good, see. Say to the corporation, your only responsibility is fiduciary to your stockholders, as opposed to what had been the social consensus before, which is that the corporation also had a responsibility to other stakeholders, the workers, the environment, the community, health, and so forth. Okay, the idea was you're going to move all your money into the hands of what became the 1% so that they can have their stock dividends. And before Reagan, stock buybacks were not even legal, so that you could have these gargantuan CEO salaries. The canard was, this will be good, see, because all that money will trickle down and it will lift all boats because these people will become job creators. Well, it's 40 years later, and the jury is in. It not only did not lift all boats, it left millions and millions of people without even a life vest, because these people's business model is not job creation. These people's business model is job elimination, is worker exploitation, squeezing whatever you can out of the working class so that this small group of people can become these wealthy aristocrats for all intents and purposes. The fact that the American people were told to go along with that because it will be good for you, see. Yes, absolutely, the American people have been played.
Let's talk about the suffering. You mentioned the suffering earlier in this dialogue. I've said oftentimes on this program, the audience knows that I believe it is the telling of truth that allows the suffering to speak. The telling of truth allows the suffering to speak. If nobody tells the truth, then the suffering, like Marianne, gets rendered invisible, right? So talk to me as you see the suffering in this country.
I mentioned before that 1 in 4 Americans live with medical debt. We have an $88 billion, and the other day I saw something that said it's up to $200 billion medical debt in this country. While, by the way, I'd like to point out that the top 5 pharmaceutical companies last year alone made a profit of $80 billion. 85 million Americans are either uninsured or underinsured. 68,000 Americans die every year from lack of health care. 18 million Americans cannot afford to fulfill the prescriptions that their doctors give them. We have Americans rationing their insulin. This is outrageous. And we have people in this country putting GoFundMe pages up on the internet to pay for life-saving operations for themselves and their loved ones. This does not happen in any other advanced democracy. Why? Because in every other advanced democracy, they have universal health care. I was giving a talk in England at Cambridge University about a month ago, and when I mentioned that people ration their insulin in this country, I saw the horror, the almost disbelief on the faces of people. That is the suffering. And also, chronic economic anxiety is a form of suffering. If you have 60% of Americans living paycheck to paycheck, if you have somewhere between 40 and 60% of Americans who cannot afford to fulfill, to absorb a $400 unexpected expenditure. That's a form of mental suffering. And then we wonder where this mental health crisis comes from. It's impossible to overstate the role that economic anxiety plays in what we see as the mental health trauma. People's lives are falling apart. And so I don't care if the pundits and the elite want to talk about their DNC created narrative and all that. It's almost like, to me, that's just DC cocktail party talk. And unfortunately, it's given the megaphone of these huge mainstream media voices, but none of that speaks to the truth of the actual human experience of the majority of Americans.
When I think of suffering, I always think of my hero, Dr. King, who spoke more powerfully to this than anybody, I think, in the history of this country. And King, were he here now, would be grading America on this scorecard. I call it the Kingian scorecard. He said repeatedly that what threatened this country most, he called it a triple threat: racism, poverty, and militarism. Racism, poverty, and militarism. Let me ask you to grade Joe Biden on those three things who you're running against, the president: racism, poverty, and militarism. Since we're talking about suffering, start with poverty. How do you grade him on poverty, income inequality, economic immobility?
So the president does what corporate Democrats do. They see the suffering and they address it on the periphery, but they refuse to challenge the underlying corporate forces that make the return of all that suffering inevitable. I'll give you an example. They make a big deal about the fact that they cut child poverty in half. They cut child poverty in half with a child tax credit. Great. At the time, I have to admit, I was wondering, well, if you could cut it in half, you could eradicate it, but be that as it may. The bigger point is they did cut it in half, and 6 months later, when that tax cut expired, they did not permanentize it. That's number one. Number two, the president came in, promised during his 2020 campaign that he would raise the minimum wage. Well, he raised it for federal workers. Remember, it's at $7.25 an hour, has not been raised in 13 years. Okay, so then the president says, let's put it in the COVID relief bill, just to go to 15. And let's remember that in most major cities in the United States, a living wage is between 24 and 25. Okay, so it comes time to put it in the COVID relief bill. Guess who shot it down? The parliamentarian. The Republicans don't let the parliamentarian get in their way. When a parliamentarian got in George Bush's way, he fired the parliamentarian. So the president found it very, very convenient to say, oh, too bad, the parliamentarian won't let us. So in issue after issue, there's this kind of weak-wristed, limp-wristed effort. What he does, it reminds me of when Eleanor Roosevelt said to her husband, we need more than the amelioration of stress. We need fundamental economic reform. So the president is about the amelioration of stress. As I said in that video, it will help you survive an unjust system. I think we need to end the unjust system. Every time I see a show on television, like let's say CNN, somebody escaped a terrible childhood, a disadvantaged childhood in the United States. Why should childhood be anything for an American child to have to escape?
That's Marianne Williamson's critique of President Biden on one of those three issues that King put in his triple threat: poverty. When we come forward after news, traffic, and sports, we get her take on Biden vis-a-vis militarism and racism, and a great deal more to talk about with Democratic presidential candidate Marianne Williamson, who joins us live in studio right now on KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA Talk 1580 is an intervention. When we come forward, includes you. KBLA Talk 1580, turning pain into power.
I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. In Illinois, more details are being revealed about the investigation into allegations of Chicago police sexual misconduct involving migrants. Leaders of the Civilian Office of Police Accountability say the probe is ongoing. The latest update came less than 2 weeks after COPA was made aware of claims that at least one officer engaged in a sexual relationship with a migrant being housed at a West Side police facility. Also in Illinois, its Supreme Court upheld the constitutionality of a state law that would end cash bail within 60 days. Critics say the move will leave residents less safe as suspects will be back on the street after an arrest. Proponents say the cash bail has a disproportionately negative impact on people of color. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network and VINnews.com.
Crews are on the scene in Artesia, 91 West before Pioneer Boulevard. An accident blocking the left lane. That's jamming up the drive from Bloomfield Avenue. In Sun Valley, we had a wreck quickly clearing on the 5 southbound at the 170 split. Traffic is jammed up from Van Nuys Boulevard. Traffic still heavy out of the valley on the 405 South Drive from Victory to Sunset.
Prime members save more at your Amazon Fresh store. As a Prime member, you'll save 10% on hundreds of items in store, from organic produce to pantry staples to handcrafted pizza. Head to Amazon.com/fresh locations and find a store near you.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
Philadelphia 76ers general manager Daryl Morey confirmed that James Harden really does want to be traded. Harden is asking Morey to do a deal that sends him to the Clippers. At the moment, there is no other team the 7-time All-Star wants to play for if he can get out of Philly. Morey admitted he's trying to work something out for Harden and the Clippers, but only at the right price. He said he won't trade Harden to the Clippers or any other team unless the trade keeps the Sixers in contention for a title. Kawhi Leonard and Paul George are off limits, plus the Clippers don't have any first-round draft picks until 2027. If the Clippers can put something on the table that impresses Morey, Harden will be in the Clippers uniform next season. The Dodgers keep rolling. They win by 7 in Baltimore, a 3-run homer for Jason Hayward. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
This is KBLA Talk 1580. Talk radio. That's music to your ears. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
JP Morgan Chase is building on the investments in California and around the country to help close the racial wealth gap and build a more equitable future. As part of JP Morgan Chase commitment, they are taking action to help improve financial wealth and access to banking in the Black community, helping more people open low-cost checking and savings accounts, hosting community seminars with supporting Black-led institutions by building awareness about financial investments, hiring community managers, and opening community center branches like Crenshaw, Inglewood, and downtown LA. Visit today, jpmorganchase.com/racial equity. Again, jpmorganchase.com/racial equity. Get the tools to help reach your financial goals. Visit today, jpmorganchase.com/racial equity. Again, jpmorganchase.com/racial equity.
In our community, mental health struggles can sometimes go unnoticed. The suicide rate among Black youth has risen faster than any other ethnic group. Only 1 in 3 African Americans who need mental health care receives it. African American women are only half as likely as their Caucasian counterparts to seek professional mental health services. Even those who guide us spiritually can sometimes face their own challenges. 45% of pastors say they've experienced depression or burnout to the extent they need to take a leave of absence from ministry. As people of faith, it's time to acknowledge it's okay not to be okay. You can pray and get help. Visit normalizehelp.org for more information and resources. Join us in raising mental health awareness in our community. Funded by the Los Angeles County Department of Mental Health and the Champion Counseling Center of Faithful Central Bible Church.
Follow the leader. KBLA Talk 1580. Follow the leader.
If you're not following KBLA Talk 1580 on all of our socials, then you're missing out. Download our app and find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and on the web at KBLA 1580.
That's right.
Again, you can find all of our socials at KBLA 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
By the way, if you miss any of our weekday shows in real time, you can always catch up by checking out the podcast of your favorite shows at your leisure. At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black.
Follow the leader. Oh my God. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader.
We're not for everybody, but we're for everybody. You're listening to KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Tavis Smiley. This is KBLA Talk 1580. Our guest in this hour is Marianne Williamson, who is running for president, Democratic presidential candidate. Marianne Williamson, again, joins us live in studio. If you're just tuning in, you can turn on the YouTube channel, turn on our app, and watch Marianne live in studio with yours truly right about now. Again, in case you've just tuned in, I'd ask Marianne to comment on what I call the Kingian scorecard of how to judge presidential candidates, where they stand on racism, poverty, and militarism. She was giving an answer on poverty. You want to add one other thing on the poverty issue before I move on?
No, you and I had just talked at the break about how there's the poor, but then there's also the near poor. And at this point, those who are afraid of becoming poor. Because if you're one paycheck away from economic catastrophe, losing your home, living in the streets, that's trauma.
Yeah. So that's your critique. You've given us your critique of President Biden on the issue of poverty. Let me move now to. Is that too loud for you? Or not? You want more?
Not enough. Yeah.
Tell me when. Can you hear better?
Yeah.
All right. Want to make sure. Yeah. Not a good conversation if the guest can't hear you. we is this one right here? There you go. We traded headphones for Marianne during that break, and I want to make sure she can hear. You good now?
Thank you.
So we got your response to President Biden on poverty. Let me move now to militarism. How do you grade this president on militarism?
$858 billion military budget says it all. 60 Minutes does a better job of holding them accountable than U.S. Congress does. They recently did an expose in which it's now well established, the price gouging that goes on. The military budget has less to do with national security and more to do with short-term profit maximization for the proverbial military-industrial complex. This is about Boeing's profits, Northrop Grumman's profits, Raytheon's profits. None of us should forget that our current Secretary of Defense is a former board member at Raytheon. So you'd think he might have been the one to maybe point out that there's a little bit of a price overrun here. But of course, and this has been true for decades, the defense industry is basically left to regulate itself. They failed every audit. So I think the American people are waking up to the fact that higher military budget does not correlate with necessarily an increase in our national security. Nobody thinks that the Iraq War increased our national security. It squandered our moral authority and our military respect, and the same with the last 20 years in Afghanistan. So I want a Department of Peace. I agree with, of all people, Donald Rumsfeld, who said we need to learn to wage peace. I see the military the way I see a surgeon. If you have to have surgery, you need to have the best, and America needs to have the best, and we need to have the best on hand. However, a reasonable person tries to avoid surgery if at all possible.
Does that, wanting a Department of Peace, does that make you a pacifist?
No, I'm not a pacifist, actually. I think that there is necessary, there are times when military action is appropriate and necessary.
Okay. So you've graded President Biden on poverty, on militarism. The third and final issue in this trifecta is racism. How's he doing?
Well, you know, I'm not a black woman, I'm a white woman, but from where I stand, black people really didn't need to be reminded that Juneteenth was important, given the fact that black people basically gave the Democrats the White House in 2020, and black people gave the Democrats the House in 2022. Black people standing in line for hours and hours in places where there were obvious and overt voter suppression efforts, being rewarded with nothing having to do with codifying Voting Rights Act, nothing having to do with serious police reform, nothing having to do with a real serious look at police brutality, and you're going to give me Juneteenth as a holiday. That's what the little Clyburn and Biden agreement was. Now, Ketanji Brown Jackson, good, but I like to think Ketanji Brown Jackson was simply the best woman for the job. So I don't see, I feel that Biden has perfected a playbook, which, to be honest, I think started with Obama. They say the right things. They don't not say the right things. Oh, climate change is, it's an existential threat. Oh, racism, we have to deal with racism. But when it comes to actually dealing with the kinds of issues that hold black people back in America on a systemic level, I'm sorry, I see very little change.
I make the assumption that if you are willing to run against Joe Biden, that you really don't want Donald Trump to be president again.
Correct.
Okay. Glad we agree on that. You made the point earlier that you are a white woman, obviously, and not a black woman. And it is the case that Donald Trump wouldn't have been president the first time around if a whole lot of white women didn't vote for him. I don't ask you to speak for white women, but since you are a white woman and could not win the Democratic nomination without a bunch of white women voting for you, what say you about white women as voters right about now?
We're not a monolith. White people aren't a monolith any more than black people are a monolith. Not one black person can speak for all black people. No white person can speak for all white people. And I think we need to remember that. And also, this is a free society. Only in a totalitarian society is everybody expected to at least pretend to agree. I can't speak for the white woman who votes for Trump. I can only speak about this white woman who would never do that.
Yeah. Earlier in this conversation, and I didn't miss this. I just kind of jotted it down to figure how I wanted to get at and when I wanted to get at it, and now I want to get at it. And that is this distinction you made, which is powerful. And I agree, between liberal and progressive. You see the wall behind me, right? That this station is unapologetically progressive. You are in a progressive station right now. Okay. We're not just liberal, we're progressive around here. And for me, that just means I get asked this question all the time. Mr. Smiley, what does that mean to be progressive? For me, it means that you want the same thing for my babies that you want for your babies. You want the same thing for everybody else's kids that you want for your kids. What is that? The best standard we can set. So I'm a progressive, and that's my definition of what it means to be a progressive. That said, you make a distinction between liberal and progressive. Joe Biden is at best a liberal. He ain't no progressive. There are some progressives, though, in Congress. I'm thinking of people like AOC, who came out the other day, as you know, and endorsed Joe Biden. So you make this distinction between liberal and progressive, but I'm just trying to figure out where you're going to find votes in the progressive wing if people like AOC are endorsing the president.
Well, I think that her endorsing the president, it's kind of like I heard Ro Khanna the other day on Breaking Point. So Ro Khanna was talking about the agenda he would like to see prevail in the U.S. government. And Kyle Kulinski and Crystal Ball said, well, wait a minute, that's Marianne Williamson's agenda. So why are you endorsing Biden? AOC said, given the field, I'm endorsing Biden. My response to that is, given Biden's policies, I'm running against him. This is talk about inside baseball, playing the chess game. I'm going to endorse Biden even though he's slow walking to the point of blocking everything I say I believe in. Why? Because then I'll still be on the inside. I'll get invited into the Oval Office. I could make a phone call to someone in the administration. I will continue to have my seat on a certain committee, maybe even support it if I want to move up. That is not working for the American people. You talked about wanting the same for everyone's child. I always say the love that will save the world cannot just be the love for our own children. It has to be love for children on the other side of town. If you look at the policies of Roosevelt, not that he was perfect, not that he didn't make his own mistakes, but at that time, the Democratic Party that Roosevelt stood for was unequivocal advocacy for the working people of the United States. To me, that is progressive. Now, in the 1990s, I'm sure you're well aware of all this, Bill Clinton, with the establishment of the Democratic Leadership Council, he created the fissure. He created the fissure because he said we can have it both ways. We can try to help people and we can play with the big boys. But those big boys representing corporate, the billionaire corporate class is institutionally resistant to serious justice, economic justice for all of those people whose pain he said he felt. And so that's the fissure in the Democratic Party today between the liberals, which have become the neoliberals, which really are a corporatist class, versus the progressives. Now, one of the things that people have been talking about, and I agree, when you look at the way the progressives are playing it, whether it has to do with AOC or anyone else who claims to be a real progressive in Congress, the parallel there on the Republican side Republicans who do not agree with the Republican power structure are playing for real and demonstrate more spine. Mm-hmm. This issue of I'm progressive, but I'm going to go along with Biden because what else do we have? Especially given, talk about invisibilization, talk about canceling, talk about minimizing. Tell Rashida Tlaib, tell her to look at my comments about Israel and then explain to me why she's not endorsing me. Ask anyone who claims to care about the climate crisis, who is a progressive endorsing Biden. Are they going to say, as some environmental groups who have endorsed Biden, environmental groups? This man is a catastrophe for the climate. They say, what else do we have? Hello, I'm Marianne Williamson. I'm running for president. And I say we need to make an immediate emergency level just transition from a dirty economy to a clean economy. But people who are part of the game are going to continue with all these performative actions simply for the reason that they enjoy getting a Christmas card from the White House. They enjoy being invited to the receptions. They enjoy having their calls returned. But certainly they know by now that when it comes to results, they're going to get schmoozed, but at the end of the day, they're going to get played.
Her name is Marianne Williamson. She's running for president on the Democratic ticket. She's got more answers. I've got more questions when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
Be sure to like and follow Tavis Smiley at The Real Tavis Smiley and get Twitter updates at Tavis Smiley. The conversation continues when we come forward. We've got a lot to talk about.
Are you interested in catching up on all the latest entertainment news, trending topics, and exciting interviews? I got you. Tune in to The Raw Report with Robin Ayers, Monday through Friday, 6 to 7 p.m. I'm your host, Robin Ayers. Join me every weekday with some of the best entertainment contributors in the business as we break down what's going on, who's got next, and what not to miss. Only on The Raw Report with Robin Ayers.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
Hollywood Walk of Fame stars in 2024. Stay tuned to find out who's in next year's class. I'm Aisha Cairo with your K-Black Minute News. A new group of 31 entertainment professionals across film, television, radio, recording, and sports entertainment will have their names etched into Hollywood's history in 2024. One of the most celebrated names on the list was the beloved Chadwick Boseman. Others for the class of 2024 in Hollywood Walk of Fame was this year's Oscar winner Michelle Yeoh in the motion picture category. Other notable names include Chris Pine, Gwen Stefani, Andre, Dr. Dre, Young, Otis Redding, Christina Ricci, Brandy Norwood, Harry Washington, and more. The dates for the stars ceremonies have not yet been scheduled. To find out all 31 inductees, visit youtube.com/Walk of Fame.
You're listening to K-Drip, where we play all the best classic water-wasting hits like watering your lawn during the hottest time of the day and leaky faucets. They're tunes from another time because now that we face a hotter, drier future, every drop counts. Despite an extremely wet winter, keep using less water, fixing leaks, and reusing indoor water for your garden. Visit SaveOurWater.com for more ways to conserve. Up next, brushing your teeth with the water on. K-Drip.
The possibility of lung cancer can be pretty scary, especially if you're one of approximately 8 million current or former smokers at high risk. That's why SaveByTheScan.org wants you to know that now there's a breakthrough low-dose CT scan that can detect lung cancer early, and it only takes 60 seconds. You stop smoking, now start screening. For an easy quiz to see if you're eligible, visit SaveByTheScan.org. It could save your life. SaveByTheScan.org is brought to you by the American Lung Association's Lung Force Initiative and the Ad Council.
Let's unpack a little bit more with Tavis Smiley. The conversation continues right now.
I believe my time is getting away from me with Marianne Williamson because she's laying out her agenda in this hour, and I'm glad to hear it. Hope you are as well. You were talking a moment ago about workers. There are strikes everywhere. Amazon people were striking, and now in Hollywood there's strikes. Teachers were just striking. UPS is striking. Everybody's striking. I think that's a good thing. Workers are finally starting to get a backbone. How do you read it?
Oh, absolutely. Yesterday I was out in the picket line with the writers and SAG-AFTRA who are striking here, and I've done what I can to support the Starbucks unionizing, and the Amazon unionizing, Christian Smalls, and elsewhere around the country. You know, the revitalization of labor at this time is one of the signs of a regreening of the rambunctious quest for justice.
But Biden says he's the best president workers have ever had.
Well, he also says that he's the greatest climate president, and he's a catastrophe for the climate. It's like I said to you before, that's their playbook. They say the right things, but if he's such a great guy for the climate, I mean, for workers, then number one, he should be beefing up the NLRB, the National Labor Relations Board. He should not have meddled in the way he did in the workers' strike. He should be fighting for a higher minimum wage, and he should be doing everything possible to support the PRO Act. So the fact that he says, I'm a big labor president, is an example of his living back in somewhere like in the 1980s or something, where maybe what he stood for would be considered pro-union.
What do you make of the fact that Democrats, liberals in Congress, have not fought more aggressively for an increase, a significant increase in the minimum wage?
For the very reason that we've been talking about. They won't do anything that challenges their corporate donors. They will only go so far. There's no spine there. They will only go so far. We will do what we can to help people, but we will not challenge the underlying corporate forces that make the return of people suffering inevitable. That, to me, is the essential difference operationally between liberals and progressives at this time.
Our remaining moments with Marianne Williamson when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
A safe place to go loud. A great place for progressive politics. KBLA Talk 1580.
To boldly go where no man has gone before.
Boldly taking talk radio where it has never gone before. New vistas, new voices, new views, new visions, new victories. We're KBLA Talk 1580, and we're taking public media black.
Meet Joe A, Joe B, and Joe C.
What's up?
3 everyday Joes perfecting their banking with Chase. Joe A is locking his lost debit card with the Chase mobile app. Joe B is cruising toward his new ride with AutoSave. And Joe C's Chase banker is helping him budget to go back to school. Tools that help protect. Support for what's next. One bank that puts you in control. Visit chase.com/checking. Chase. Make more of what's yours.
Chase mobile app is available for select mobile devices. Messaging and data rates may apply. JP Morgan Chase Bank, N.A. member FDIC.
Some people won't give you the real talk on drugs, but it's time we know the facts. Fentanyl is killing people. It's a powerful opioid, often made illegally and commonly mixed with illicit drugs. It can even be pressed into counterfeit pills that resemble prescription medications. Just 2 milligrams, about the size of a few grains of sand, can potentially be lethal. This isn't an ad to scare you, but it is an ad to make you think twice. Get the facts. Go to realdealonfentanyl.com. This message is brought to you by the Ad Council.
Have you heard about Lendistry? Lendistry is a national Black-led small business lender that is headquartered right here in LA. Once you've started your business, Lendistry provides flexible financing options starting at $50,000 to help you access the affordable capital needed to grow. Whether financing is needed to increase working capital, acquire a business, purchase inventory and equipment, or refinance debt, Lendistry has a solution for you. Lending products range from traditional business term loans and non-revolving lines of credit to SBA 7A loans and commercial real estate financing. Lendistry's pre-application process is simple and does not impact your credit score. Visit lendistry.com/KBLA to learn more and to get started with an application right from the website.
Conversations that matter. You're listening to Tavis Smiley on KBLA Talk 1580.
In fact, you're listening to Democratic President candidate Marianne Williamson on KBLA Talk 1580, not just Tavis Smiley. 5 minutes left in this conversation. Let me see if I can squeeze out a few more things that I want Marianne to sound off on. In no particular order, number one, your fundraising. It takes a lot of money to run for president, particularly when you're running against an incumbent. By your own admission, you just raised $35 million the other day, the party that is. So how's your fundraising and that kind of stuff?
Well, you certainly can't compare the $1 million that we have raised to the $35 million that the president has raised. You know, I don't have super PACs that are supporting me. I don't have corporate donors, obviously. We are a people people-supported campaign. And I think many people are only just waking up to the progressive message of this campaign, to the recognition that I am the only progressive in this race, and to the realization that, if you want this message out there, even the message out there, much less, the actual presidency who would pull these kinds of levers, then you're going to have to invest in that. And I hope that more people will, that they can go to Marianne2024.com. And I think a lot of people, particularly young people who are just beginning this kind of activism, aren't in the habit yet of financial giving to campaigns, and also underestimate what $5 can do. Even $5, particularly if you could give $5 a month. Our average donation is, I think, $20, $25. And obviously we need more of them. But we exist, we're this little engine that could, and it's still early in the campaign.
You mentioned 2020. You ran in 2020.
Yes.
Now you're running again in 2024. What are your takeaways? What did you learn from 2020 that's going to make your campaign better in 2024?
I don't know if it makes it better. I learned that the system, the political media industrial complex, I call it, is even more corrupt than I feared. And this time I see even more vicious than I feared. But the people of the United States are even more wonderful. I think the problem in this country is not the voters. It's not the people. On poll after poll, you can see that we're a little left of center. The majority of Americans, both Democrats and Republicans, want universal health care. They want tuition-free college and tech school. They want paid family leave. And the problem is the sclerotic political system that does as much to thwart as to facilitate the real expression of the will of the people. So it's a roller coaster. You've been around this a long time. There's a world of that's just vicious and dark and unfair and unethical, and you see things you can't even believe people are doing. And then there's another side of it, which is actual the conversations among the American people, and that to me is exhilarating, and that's why I'm doing it. There is someone, a narcissistic, malignant political character who we all know, who has harnessed some of the lower aspects of American consciousness, and now we need to harness those better angels of our nature, and that's what this campaign is doing.
I mentioned earlier that Donald Trump was on stage last night in a town hall at Fox News. He was not asked, nor did he comment on whether or not he would be present for the August 28th Republican debate, the first one of the season. I raise that only because I don't know that a sitting president will subject himself to being debated. Is it your sense that Joe Biden will stand for debates with you and others, perhaps?
The DNC has made it very clear that there will be no debates.
No debates.
But I say, if the president wants to prove his mental agility, if he wants to prove that he's up to the job of one day debating Trump, then he should debate Robert Kennedy and myself and show people what he's got.
And very quickly, what does Marianne Williamson make of his mental agility at this point?
Once again, why don't put it out there, Mr. President? Debate me. Debate Robert Kennedy. Let us put it out there and let the American people decide for themselves.
And finally, this is I say this from the heart. I was so delighted all these years ago when you started Project Angel Food for all the right reasons then. I only got a minute left now. But what do you make of the fact that an entity that you helped to start is more necessary now, 16 years later, than less necessary given the suffering in this country?
Well, you're absolutely correct. People celebrate the growth of the organization. And while I give kudos absolutely to those on the board and leadership who, year after year have kept it alive and kept it thriving, it is, as you said, not good news that there's such an extraordinary need for it. There should not be so many thousands of people in Los Angeles County alone who need these kinds of services. I spoke the other night at the Union Rescue Mission on Skid Row. We have 78,000 homeless people out on the streets sleeping in Los Angeles County, 78,000 every night. So I'm proud of Project Angel Food. I'm proud of this city for how it has shown up in its founding, which I remember very well. I think the city has a lot to be proud of, the way it has continued to support the organization. But the fact that so many people lacking health care, lacking food, lacking any help other than what this one charity can bring to them every day is a terrible sign and something I believe tragic for our society.
We invited, she accepted the invitation, as I hope all the candidates will, and I've been delighted to have had in studio Democratic presidential candidate Marianne Williamson. Marianne, good to have you here. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
All the best to you.
Thank you very much.
That's our show for today. Back here tomorrow morning to do it all over again, Lord willing. Until then, thanks for tuning in, and as always, keep the faith.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. In Illinois, more details are being revealed about the investigation into allegations of Chicago police sexual misconduct involving migrants.